You still have that plain face, don't you? By the way, Kate, are you still single and living alone? That's so hilarious. On a holiday, when the doorbell rang, I opened the door to find my sister and standing there, the same sister who had taken my husband Jim from me. 2 years ago, their affair had been discovered, and I had broken up with him. Since then, I had lost track of the two of them, but now Anne had suddenly shown up, mocking my appearance and flaunting the ring on her left ring finger. We got married, so I thought we should meet at least once. Now I'm happily living with your ex-husband. My name is Kate. Since I was a child, I had always been self-conscious about my appearance. My face and body were plain and unremarkable, and while I looked normal to others, I had a beautiful sister named Anne. I had always been compared to her, who was 5 years younger than me. I once overheard relatives. "And is so cute, but Kate is plain. They don't look like sisters. Are they really from the same parents?" saying. Anne knew about these comments and had always looked down on me since childhood. She had a selfish personality and believed she was superior to me, her older sister, and often demanded my things or simply took them if I didn't give them to her. Because of this, I frequently had unpleasant experiences living with her. However, our parents treated us equally regardless of our appearances. They ignored the relatives' hurtful remarks and showered me with love, which made me love my parents dearly. But my parents couldn't protect me from the harsh words at school. Naturally, I was compared to and at school as well. The cute younger sister and the plain older sister. This comparison was frequent, so I decided to excel in academics, as I couldn't compete with my sister in looks. My hard work paid off, and I consistently ranked at the top of my class. My best subject was Spanish, and my parents praised me every time I scored well on a test. However, when I was 17, my mother died in an accident. After mourning her death, I took over the household chores, but Anne didn't seem to grieve much and started treating me like a housekeeper. She always took advantage of our father's absence, which made it even worse. At that time, Anne was just starting middle school. She would order me to buy snacks and drinks and sometimes even demanded money. My monthly allowance is too small. Kate, you don't care about fashion or buying things, right? So, you can lend me some money, can't you? Even when I lent her money reluctantly, she never paid me back. Seeing and becoming more selfish than ever after our mother passed away, I felt a sense of urgency to leave home as soon as possible. I studied hard and managed to get into the university of my choice, starting to live on my own. After 4 peaceful years at university, I landed a job at a major international company. Being good at Spanish, my language skills improved even more after joining the company. Although I faced many challenges, I found my work rewarding and diligently performed my duties for 5 years. Just as I was achieving great success, a male employee who had joined the company that year suddenly confessed his feelings to me. "I've been attracted to you since the first time I saw you. Please go out with me." He stopped me on my way home from work and said this. The man who would later become my boyfriend, Jim, was 5 years younger than me and worked in the same department.
What? Why me? Is this some kind of prank?
When he confessed his feelings, I felt more bewildered than happy. He was quite handsome and very popular at work. There were many women in the company who were much more attractive than I was, so I couldn't help but suspect that Jim was just playing around by choosing to confess to someone as plain as me. But Jim, looking straight at me with a serious expression, continued. "Kate, you always work so hard and take care of the younger employees. I've always admired your dedication and kindness." I was surprised because I had hardly ever talked to Jim before. I never imagined that someone as successful as him would even notice me. Honestly, I hadn't paid much attention to him until he confessed to me. Even when other female employees gossiped about how handsome he was, to me, he seemed like someone who was just used to the attention of women and was far out of my league. But Jim's sincere demeanor at that moment deeply moved me.
"If you're okay with someone like me, I'd love to," I said.
I was so embarrassed that I looked down, but when I lifted my head, I clearly remember seeing his delighted smile. I had almost no experience dating men. Throughout high school, I was always compared to and never had a chance for romance, and in college, the one guy I briefly dated broke up with me, calling me dull and plain. So, the idea of dating someone as good-looking as Jim was incredibly exciting to me at the time. We soon started living together. Our relationship went smoothly, and Jim would visit my father several times a year to show his face. My father was very happy that I had a boyfriend. Jim also seriously told my father, "I want to marry Kate someday," which made me incredibly happy. 3 years later, we got married. I was 30, and Jim was 25. When our coworkers heard about the wedding, they all warmly congratulated us, and I was on cloud 9. Jim transferred to a different department at work after our marriage, but we both continued to work hard. After registering our marriage, we decided to visit my father together. My father was happy about our marriage, but I hadn't informed my sister about it. Maybe my father had told her, but I hadn't received any contact from her. Although I knew her contact information, we hadn't kept in touch since I left home, and I avoided seeing her whenever I visited. And was still living at home. She had repeated a year in high school and 2 more in college, finally graduating this year. I planned my visit to avoid meeting Anne, who I didn't want to see. However, while my father, Jim, and I were chatting pleasantly, the front door opened and a familiar voice called out, "I'm home." I froze in surprise, as I feared, and walked into the living room. "And you're home early today," my father said. "My plans got canceled, so I came back. By the way, who's this handsome guy?" And explained about her canceled plans and then, without looking at me, stared intently at Jim. I felt uncomfortable with how she seemed to be sizing him up and was about to tell her to stop when Jim's face lit up at the sight of Anne. "Nice to meet you. I'm Jim, Kate's husband," he said, standing up and smiling as he approached Anne. Jim was obviously charmed, and Anne introduced herself with a look that suggested she didn't mind the attention. I had a bad feeling about this. Anne turned to me with a sly smile. "I heard from Dad that Kate got married, but I can't believe she married someone so handsome. Isn't he too good for plain Kate?"
"Anne, how could you say such a thing?"
Dad immediately scolded her, but it had no effect on Anne. On the contrary, Anne clung to Jim, linking her arm with his and pressing her body close. "Hey, Jim. How old are you? What do you do on your days off?" And looked up at Jim with a sweet voice, trying to entice him. Rather than being bothered, Jim started conversing with her, still close, leaving me unsure of what to do.
"Anne, knock it off."
I couldn't bring myself to yell, and I was about to cry with vague anxiety when Dad sternly reprimanded Anne. She glared at me with discontent but reluctantly pulled away from Jim and left the living room. After that, conversations with Dad didn't go smoothly, and we decided to leave. However, just as we were about to step out the door, Anne, who was supposed to be in her room, came back and snuggled up to Jim again. "Jim, come again soon." She quickly stepped back, but I couldn't shake off the bad feeling. Because Jim looked so happy while talking to Anne. It was clear he was captivated by her beauty. Since visiting my parents' house, his behavior had significantly changed. He started carrying his smartphone everywhere, even to the bathroom or when he went to the toilet. Hey, what's going on lately? Are you expecting a message from someone? When I asked curiously. None of your business, Kate. Jim only responded irritably. Recently, Jim's attitude towards me had become cold, almost like he was a different person. Our conversations as a couple dwindled, and Jim began going out alone from the morning on weekends. He would always return home late at night or early the next morning. Whenever I asked where he had been, he always evaded the question. I didn't want to doubt Jim, but with such frequent occurrences, my distrust only grew. One day, I had a business trip that would keep me away for a few days. The trip was supposed to last 3 days. However, the work finished half a day early, allowing me to return home on the night of the second day. I sent a message to Jim before coming back, but there was no reply even after I arrived home. I thought it was probably because it was sudden, and he hadn't checked his smartphone, so I didn't worry about it as I opened the front door. I had a feeling someone was there. At that moment, I felt the same bad premonition as when Jim first met Anne. He wasn't in the living room. But I heard voices coming from the bedroom, so I decided to head there. I slowly opened the closed door, and I was shocked by the scene. Jim and Anne were there, naked and embracing each other.
What are you two doing?
I was momentarily stunned, but quickly came to my senses and shouted, "What the hell, Kate? I thought you were coming back tomorrow." Jim, apparently not having checked his smartphone, grumbled while getting dressed, showing no sign of remorse. He might have been ignoring my messages on purpose. "What the hell, you ruined a good moment. Kate, you never know how to read the room, do you?" And glared at me with annoyance after getting dressed.
And what is going on? This is cheating.
I angrily confronted her, but Anne mocked me. "What? Jim and I agreed to this, so there's no problem. Jim said he prefers me to a plain woman like you," Anne said triumphantly, clinging to Jim. Jim patted Anne's head with satisfaction, not even glancing my way, even though I was his wife. Watching the two of them, my intense anger quickly subsided, and my affection for Jim began to fade. While they were engrossed in each other, I slipped my hand into my pocket, took out my smartphone, and started operating it. "Hey, Jim. Recently, you've been distant and always carrying your smartphone around. Is it because you've been in contact with Anne?" I asked, trying to remain calm. Jim finally looked at me and sneered. "Yeah, that's right. And is beautiful and attractive, unlike you, Kate. It's a pity that Anne has an unattractive sister like you." Jim mocked my appearance and praised Anne. Apparently, Jim had taken a liking to Anne when he visited my family some time ago, and felt the same way. When we were leaving, she secretly slipped a note with her contact information into his pocket. Jim sent a message to the number on that note, and that's how their relationship started, Jim explained unapologetically. "Furthermore, I only married you because I knew about your achievements and thought you'd make a good wallet. Who would want to be with someone as unattractive as you otherwise?" Hearing his insults, my vision nearly went black. Jim's serious demeanor when he confessed his feelings to me had been a lie to deceive me. Fighting back tears of frustration, I quickly called my father to report what Anne and Jim had done. My father rushed over to my house, and seeing Jim and Anne together, he was furious.
"You too! What a stupid thing you've done!"
However, Anne showed no remorse despite my father's anger. Jim also. "I'm sorry about this, but I've fallen in love with Anne," he said brazenly. Even my father was taken aback by his audacity, sighing deeply.
"That's enough, Anne. I'm cutting ties with you. I've overlooked your selfishness up to now, but this time I'm done. You haven't been looking for a job at all, so I won't be helping you anymore. Don't come back home.
Even when my father disowned her, her expression didn't change. Fine by me.
I'm going to be happy with Jim from now on.
Not a single word of apology to my father for raising her all these years. My disgust grew. I reached my breaking point and glared at the two of them.
Then do whatever you want. Jim, we're getting a divorce.
Yeah, fine. That would be a relief.
Don't ever show your face to me again.
His insults no longer reached my ears. I felt ridiculous for having been married to someone like him, even for a short while. I told Jim I was divorcing him, left them behind, and moved out of my apartment that very day. After moving back to my family home, I quit my job, but thanks to my father, I quickly found a new one. My father worked for a foreign company in the same industry as my previous job. There was a job opening, and my father, who held a high position, spoke to the CEO on my behalf to get me hired. By the time the divorce was finalized, Jim had also left the company, and he and Aunt had moved somewhere unknown. I enjoyed a peaceful life with my father and adapted well to my new job. 2 years passed like that. By this time, I had almost forgotten about Jim and Aunt, but then something unexpected happened. It was my day off, and I was doing housework when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood Jim and Anne, who had been missing. Seeing my face, they both sneered. "How have you been?" Jim said to me, as I stood there in shock at their sudden visit. "You still have that plain face, huh? Seriously, Kate, still living at home and single? It's hilarious." And laughed.
"What are you even doing here?"
I asked, feeling exasperated, and took the opportunity to show off her left hand. A ring sparkled on her ring finger, and Jim was wearing a matching one.
"We got married. Thought we'd drop by to see my dad at least once. Jim and I are living happily together now."
I gave them a cold look, wondering how she could say that to her ex-wife. I wanted to slam the door shut and kick them out immediately, but they pushed past me and forced their way inside.
"Move. Is Tom here?"
Jim bumped into my shoulder on purpose as he rudely entered the house. And, who had been disowned by my father, acted like she didn't remember any of it. Hearing the commotion, my father came out from the back of the house. He was momentarily surprised to see and Jim, but quickly put on a smile.
"Oh, Anne. And Jim, too. You came at just the right time. I have something to discuss with you both. Come this way."
And Jim seemed pleased by my father's reaction. They followed his lead and headed to the living room with light steps, and I trailed behind them. My father handed them some papers as they sat down on the couch, without a hint of suspicion. Their faces froze as they read the contents. It was a bill for compensation for their affair with me.
"What is this? Dad, what does this mean?"
Jim and Anne protested, turning pale. My father, his earlier cheerful expression replaced with a stern glare, said,
"There's nothing to explain. I never forgave you for what you did to Kate. I couldn't track you down before, but now that you're here, I'm holding you accountable."
He pressed on as and Jim grew more anxious.
"At the time, Kate captured photos and recordings of your affair. The evidence is solid. You can't talk your way out of this."
And Jim fell silent under my father's harsh scrutiny. 2 years ago, I had secretly recorded audio and taken photos when I caught them in the act. I still had the data on my smartphone, ready to present it as proof of their infidelity.
"There's no way we can come up with that kind of money,"
Jim said in a despairing voice. But my father's expression,
"I have another matter to discuss with you,"
softened. He then retrieved a few more papers from a drawer and handed them to and Jim. I already knew what they were, the deed transfer documents for this house. My father proposed giving them the house as a lifetime gift. As expected, their eyes lit up instantly, and they eagerly agreed.
So, you're giving us this house? Why didn't you say so earlier?
Then we can sell the house to pay off the compensation. All they seemed to care about was selling the house for money. Their financial situation was tight, and they quickly signed the papers, thrilled with the unexpected windfall.
So, Kate gets nothing even though she lives here with Dad?
That's sad. And sneered at me after signing the papers. She seemed to think my father wasn't giving me anything. When I didn't respond, they began preparing to leave, their business concluded.
All right, Dad, we'll be back. You two make sure to pay Kate her compensation soon.
My father said firmly, and Jim replied, Of course, Tom.
Thanks for giving us the house,
he answered dismissively. Watching them leave, still mocking me and clearly pleased with themselves, I saw my father look at me and nod with a smile. I nodded in return and started packing for a certain preparation. Actually, my father and I had originally planned to move out of this house soon. It was just at that time that Ann and Jim appeared, so my father brought up the topic of giving them an advance inheritance. After we moved out, Ann and Jim tried to sell the family home immediately, but the house, although spacious, was quite old and deteriorated. We received a call about that once.
You really stuck us with that old house. It's not worth any money at all.
As soon as the call connected, she was furious, but I had no intention of taking her seriously.
You two were the ones who happily signed the contract, weren't you? I don't care about the money. As long as I get the compensation, that's all I need. No way!
I ignored the disheartened Ann and hung up the phone. In the end, selling the house didn't come close to covering the compensation, so Ann and Jim had to take on debt and work non-stop every day. Jim had already changed jobs, but his salary was lower than at his previous company, making life tough. Additionally, Ann, who had always lived off her parents' and Jim's money, had never worked before. As a result, she was extremely exhausted from the unfamiliar working life at the company she somehow managed to get hired at. One day, my sister and her husband, burdened with huge debts, called me again. However, at that time, I was on a plane with my father, so my smartphone was turned off, and I didn't notice the call. We were on an international flight, out of signal range for more than half a day. After getting off the plane, I checked my smartphone and found dozens of messages from Ann and Jim. The messages were demanding a redo of the advance inheritance.
How selfish can they be? We've already given them the compensation. I don't intend to deal with those two anymore.
My father, muttering this, had also received a ton of messages on his smartphone and started deleting all of them in exasperation. I don't want to have anything to do with them either. But since we're overseas now, we won't meet them again in the future. After that, we blocked their numbers and rejected their calls, cutting off all contact from Ann and Jim. Actually, my father and I have decided to live abroad from now on. And currently, I'm remarried, and my husband was also on the plane with us. I met my husband at the company I joined thanks to my father. He was an employee sent from overseas, and he said he was attracted to my intelligence and thoughtfulness, so he asked me out, and we soon got married. The company has now launched a project to expand its business overseas, and since I can speak Spanish, I moved abroad with my husband and father. The new house we bought, thanks to my husband, who is a local, is a very luxurious detached property. Since moving into the new house, I've been able to forget all the unpleasant things from before. Now I can live freely and am working hard every day in this new place. I'm enjoying my new life, feeling fulfilled by the overseas project with my husband and father.
You're really clueless, aren't you? The inheritance! The inheritance! Hand it over already,
said Mary, my sister-in-law, barging in as soon as the front door was opened, happily talking at her own pace. Despite not being close, her sudden demand left me baffled.
If it weren't for Henry, I wouldn't even want to come near such a gloomy place.
Indeed, to Mary, adorned in flashy clothes and accessories, the home of her contrasting brother Henry and his daughter-in-law, me, must have seemed dreary. However, I thought Mary, who talked about the inheritance at the doorway without even looking at her late brother's portrait, was much more spiteful. This attitude of Mary's wasn't new. She boasted about her confidence in her appearance and often treated the gentle-natured Henry harshly. I had heard from him that once he began to advance in his career and earn a significant income, Mary changed her attitude and started cozying up to him. I was truly appalled by Mary's lack of compassion, barely visiting when Henry was repeatedly in and out of the hospital and not crying at all during the funeral. I had decided to have nothing more to do with her, but greedy Mary wouldn't have it.
We don't have all day. Hurry up. Sally must be busy too, right?
Mary, with eyes gleaming with anticipation, was convinced she was entitled to the inheritance. However, I possessed something that would utterly change that expression. It was the last words from my late husband. Read this, and you'll understand everything. I am Sally, a widow in her mid-60s, living a modest life. I lost my beloved husband about a month ago, his long-standing illness having worsened. We met and married in our 40s, so we had no children. The loss felt overwhelming, having supported each other for 20 years. Was there any need to keep cooking for someone when there were no children? I considered following Henry but, embarrassingly, lacked the courage. Furthermore,
no matter what happens to me, live on without losing heart. Sally, you're an independent and remarkable woman,
Henry often told me. Ignoring his now final words was something I could not do. Life changed drastically after Henry passed away. I witnessed his last moments at the hospital in the middle of the night, then went straight to arrange the funeral, which proceeded smoothly. This time, being too overwhelmed to mourn or dwell on my thoughts about Henry was somewhat a relief. Many people, including my sister and her husband, encouraged me and helped prepare for the funeral, which helped me get through this month. I barely remember this period.
Sally, you did a commendable job as the chief mourner. Henry must be resting in peace in heaven, assured by your strength,
my sister later told me. Though everything was new and I was constantly on edge, which led to a few days of illness, it wasn't all bad. More people attended the funeral than I had anticipated. Henry had worked at a renowned company and was a senior executive, so I expected many attendees I wouldn't know. However, colleagues from the company praised Henry's character and some even shed tears. Among them were people who had traveled from overseas branches, sharing stories of going out for drinks with Henry during his business trips. It was regrettable that I couldn't spend ample time with each of them, but I made sure to note down everyone's names and addresses to send thank you notes and small tokens of appreciation later. My sister and her husband took care of these arrangements, allowing me some respite now. I'm endlessly grateful for Henry's gentle nature, which, I believe, made this possible. I want to boast about being blessed with such wonderful people, but lately, I've had doubts. Primarily because of his sister, my sister-in-law, Mary. Despite being 12 years younger than Henry, Mary is still youthful compared to women her age. Her high sense of beauty made her somewhat of a celebrity in the neighborhood. And she is well aware of it, seemingly enjoying her days enhancing her beauty. I have no issue with that. Though she's turning 58 and the appropriateness of wearing miniskirts is debatable, it's not for others to judge, so it doesn't bother me. The problem lies in her constantly making snide remarks towards me. I'm not as pretty as her, nor do I share her enthusiasm for yoga and spas.
Sally, you always look so dowdy. Aren't you embarrassed? Henry was wealthy. Why didn't he marry someone more beautiful?
She'd say, evaluating what I wore as if appraising my worth whenever we met.
What's with using an unknown brand bag at your age? And those shoes, how long have you been wearing them? You were wearing those the last time we met, right? It's easy for me to tell when someone lacks taste, even if their clothes are nice, because it shows in their accessories. Won't Henry buy you any? He doesn't desire material things, so if you asked, he would buy them for you, wouldn't he?
I have enough bags and shoes, though not as many as her. Being called sloppy is one thing, but I've never been one to hoard items. In fact, I make it a point to discard at least one old item whenever I buy something new, so my home is rather clean. Whenever Henry asked me if I wanted anything for our anniversary or my birthday, I would plan a trip without hesitation. I've always believed that memories are invaluable and cannot be bought. Now that he is gone, I'm glad I made those choices. Mary would mock me indirectly with her remarks.
Henry wasn't much to look at, so in that sense, you're well suited. But you must have married him for his money, right?
No matter the insult, she always concludes with this. This is the issue I have with Mary's behavior. She spreads rumors among relatives that I married Henry for his money. Apparently, there were plenty of women who approached him with that intention. He wasn't one for gambling or nightlife. His hobby was mostly fishing, so I remember being surprised by the amount of his savings when we got married. However, I never intended to splurge his wealth. At that time, I had been working for 20 years at the same company and had my own savings, though not as much as him. Sharing similar values about not spending excessively was one reason we got married, not because I was after Henry's money as Mary claims. I've tried explaining this to her and asking her to correct this misunderstanding with our relatives, but she never listens. It seems she's decided we're incompatible and constantly finds fault with me. Say has always been fiercely competitive, and Henry, during his lifetime, tried to avoid her as much as possible. This might be why she barely helped with Henry's funeral arrangements. Indeed, I was the chief mourner, but whenever Henry fell ill or was hospitalized, she would never offer words of concern, no matter how often I contacted her. On the contrary, there was a time when she got angry and said,
"Don't contact me about every little thing."
After that, I internally decided not to inform Henry about anything that happened. However, thinking that letting Henry know could affect his condition, I would lie gently in front of him, saying, "Mary was worried about you." In the end, she never showed herself to Henry before he passed away, so even at the wake, she maintained an attitude as if she was there out of obligation, almost as though it was someone else's problem. Yet, ever since she heard Henry was ill, she hardly had an appetite and cried so much she couldn't cry anymore. Maybe that's why she looks so down now. She said she couldn't visit the hospital because she didn't want to see Henry in a weakened state. The relatives whispered. Hearing this, I was overwhelmed with an indescribable frustration and, compounded by the shock of losing Henry, tears began to blur my vision. Mary, spoken of as a tragic heroine, had skin too radiant for someone who supposedly lost their appetite, and naturally, there were no tear stains or signs of swollen eyes. Despite telling me not to contact her, she seemed humble in front of the relatives. If my sister hadn't been there to sense my feelings and tactfully lead me away, I might have lost my composure and shouted something at the relatives. Knowing Mary could not even show respect for the deceased, I resolved to have nothing to do with her going forward. After the funeral, I gradually sorted through Henry's belongings, balancing work and household duties, and at the same time, started to regain my composure. At first, each item of Henry's that disappeared felt like erasing a memory, but I reminded myself that the memories with Henry were held most dearly in my heart. I cherished the time spent with those who attended the funeral, slowly reclaiming my tranquil life. Then, predictably, it was Mary who disrupted these peaceful days. She rang the doorbell and knocked repeatedly.
"Sally, you're there, aren't you? Your sister has come all this way, so open up,"
she called out, though I never considered her my sister. Mary raised her voice as if to perform for the neighbors. With laundry hanging outside, playing dead wasn't an option.
What were you doing? I was about to get sunburnt waiting,
she said the moment I unlocked the door, barging in without hesitation, thrusting a bag from a well-known foreign brand into my hands and beginning to remove her shoes.
What's this all about?
I managed to ask, to which she dramatically sighed.
I've been so busy and couldn't visit, thinking you might be feeling down all by yourself. So, I brought something nice,
she said, retrieving the bag she'd handed me to reveal its contents while standing. Accessories, perfume, and high-end baked goods similar to those Mary usually enjoyed, none of which seemed fitting for me. Did she really think I would be delighted to receive these? Moreover, her behavior today was unusually gentle.
I may have been harsh on you before, but you were the woman my only brother chose. I didn't want to hand him over to a gold digger. But seeing you at the funeral made me realize you're different. Only someone who truly loved Henry could shed so many tears and give a speech with disheveled hair, disregarding what others think.
It seems she's not used to praising people. Even when she tries to appease me, she can't help but comment on my appearance or actions. However, the way she looked at me carried a sort of passion, as if she was in the presence of someone she respected. Mary's overtly changed demeanor only left me utterly bewildered, as she continued to shower me with what seemed like compliments. Despite my growing discomfort from not knowing what she truly thought. I'm sorry. I still haven't settled the estate affairs. It's not in a state for visitors right now, I conveyed gently. Her eyes narrowed, returning to her usual cold gaze.
Do you really think I came all this way just to see your annoying faces?
She shouted.
It's about the inheritance, obviously. You shouldn't have to be told that.
What? Confused by her gesture, indicating I should hand something over, I was at a loss.
How long do you think I've been waiting? I have a pretty good idea of how much Henry earned, so I know roughly how much I should be getting from the inheritance. It's pointless for you to try to keep it all. Hand it over now. If you're thinking of deceiving me, I'll call a lawyer and the police.
The division of property is being handled by a lawyer, so there's no deception involved.
Don't play dumb. I'm entitled to a share of the inheritance, aren't I?
She yelled, her face turning red. Given that Henry and Mary were siblings, it would be natural for Mary to have a share. However, Henry often spoke about this issue, expressing his concern. Mary, known for her beauty, alongside their parents who favored her, had bullied Henry since childhood for his looks. To prove them wrong, Henry excelled academically, attended a national university through scholarships and part-time jobs, and eventually climbed the corporate ladder in a major company. The only times Henry spoke of himself were about overcoming those dark times. Naturally, anyone would be troubled at the thought of such a person receiving an inheritance. When Henry confided in me about this dilemma, I urged him to decide for himself. I only learned of Henry's decision after his passing. Unaware of this, her demeanor shifted dramatically, railing against me.
For a daughter-in-law to almost take the entire inheritance, you're just as greedy for money. I always suspected something fishy about you marrying that plain man after 40. The only reason to spend a lifetime with someone who has no merit but his wealth. I listened patiently to your talk of love, values, and all that. Just give me half of your share right now, and I'll disappear.
It appears the sweet words and gifts were just a ploy to wrest his inheritance from me. Having been a target of her animosity for so long, I had anticipated there might be ulterior motives behind her sudden change of behavior. Witnessing her brazenly shout in the entryway, I realized just how lacking her sense of morality was. I wondered what Henry, peacefully listening from heaven, would think of all this. I told Mary to wait there for a moment, intending to show her a particular document. Upon hearing this, Mary's eyes sparkled instantly.
You really understand me. Let's go eat some delicious French cuisine with that money next time.
and she blurted out something nonsensical. Not wanting to be swept up in Mary's pace, I retrieved the document from the back room without agreeing to her plans and handed it to her.
"Please, this is from Henry. You can have it,"
I said as I gave her the document, Henry's last letter. Essentially his will. Mary, sensing what it was, quickly opened it. Her eyebrows, meticulously shaped, moved up and down, clearly agitated by the letter's contents.
"What does this mean? I don't understand this."
Her ignorance stemmed from her own choice not to see Henry. The words almost reached my lips, but seeing Mary collapse weakly into a seat, I doubted they would reach her now. The will stated that Henry bequeathed all his possessions to me, as a final gesture of appreciation for a life shared in mutual support and love, leaving a passionately written message too private to read aloud. Reading this, I felt a renewed warmth for Henry, who thought of me even while battling his illness, making it clear Mary would receive not a cent. Despite the clear answer, Mary, unable or unwilling to accept reality. "What does this mean?" she murmured. Her face paled, and no response came from her as I half forced her out and quickly locked the door. Through the door's glass, I faintly saw Mary's shadow sway and stagger away. Feeling relieved that she wouldn't bother me again after reading the will was short-lived, the next afternoon, Mary called.
"I never thought you could be such a villain, Sally. How dare you deceive me?"
Her fury was palpable even over the phone, sending a chill down my spine. But I had done nothing wrong, nor did I deserve to be slandered as a villain by her. I was about to respond with renewed determination, but she cut me off.
"You're probably feeling pretty good about knocking me down, aren't you? But sadly for you, you're about to experience real pain. This is your punishment for angering me. Don't think apologizing now will make me forgive you."
I could vaguely understand she was talking about the inheritance, but I had no idea what she meant by me feeling pain or apologizing. Confused and silent, perhaps she thought my silence was hesitation, as she began to laugh loudly.
"See? It's too late for apologies. I'd love to visit you right now, but I have an appointment with my lawyer, so I'm busy."
Her triumphant statement made no sense to me. Why she needed a lawyer or why she felt the need to inform me about it was beyond me. Instead of bothering with me, she could have gone to her usual yoga or spa sessions, I thought idly, only to be interrupted by her yelling.
"Don't you understand the situation? Talking to you is just frustrating, a real beauty killer. I'm not satisfied with the division of the estate and am preparing to sue over it. Whether you schemed in secret with your husband or not, it's inconceivable for a daughter-in-law to take everything. It's against the law. Thinking showing me Henry's will would silence me was a big mistake. To think you'd exploit a sick Henry for your gain, you have no conscience. I have a right to the inheritance, and I intend to claim it."
It seems she was under the impression I was hoarding the inheritance. By manipulating Henry to write the will in my favor, which finally broke my silence. "It would be a waste of your time to go." The will was directly handed to a lawyer by Henry himself. I only read it afterwards, so there was no trickery involved. Plus, I've been informed by the lawyer that you have no claim to the inheritance. So, I think it's best if you didn't bother, as you're unlikely to be taken seriously. My calm response only angered her further, her voice growing louder.
"What's with that attitude? You won't be able to act so smug for long. Just wait, I'm serious. I've been calling repeatedly since yesterday and finally got an appointment. The lawyer understood my determination. Surely, they'll be on my side and manage to get compensation from you. Just you wait."
With those words, reminiscent of a cartoon villain, she hung up. Why she called when she wouldn't listen to anything I said was beyond me. Perhaps she thought the mention of a lawyer would rattle me, enjoying the thought of my unease. far from reflecting on not receiving a cent from her own brother, she seemed rather invigorated by her resolve to take what she believed was hers by any means necessary. Months passed without incident, and I managed to sort through Henry's study, which had been cluttered with various items. In parallel, I gradually packed up, leaving the house filled with memories of Henry and me. Henry had always wanted to retire to a quiet house in the suburbs, and I decided to fulfill that wish. Selling the house and land we lived in, I moved to an area where my sister and her husband lived, using the proceeds as a down payment. While it's regrettable we couldn't do it while Henry was alive, our dog Max, who had been with us for over 10 years, seemed to enjoy the new home. Letting go of the house meant I had far fewer belongings, but the thought of gradually making the new place comfortable brought me some hope for the future. Yet, the strange feeling of Henry's absence persisted, and the lack of furniture only seemed to amplify the loneliness. Especially when Max was sleeping, I found myself lost in thought more often than not, knowing it wasn't particularly healthy. As if interrupting my days, my smartphone suddenly blared one day. Half asleep and without checking, I answered during a TV show.
"You're trying to ruin me, you curse!"
It was Mary, screaming without any preamble, which instantly woke me up, though it was still unclear what she was ranting about this time. Sensing my silence, Mary didn't wait for a response before continuing.
"It's your fault I'm getting divorced. The inheritance didn't come through because of you."
What? My surprised response was more out of formality. I had guessed the situation. Likely, Mary had told her husband she would receive a portion of Henry's estate, and their relationship soured when that didn't happen. A fragile marriage, to say the least. Blaming their issues on me was hardly fair.
"Don't just stay quiet. Apologize. Your fault I can't live properly now. What am I supposed to do all alone?"
Why don't you work? You're still young in your 50s. I retorted, causing Mary to fall silent. Whether irritated by the suggestion to work or caught off guard by the mention of her age, Mary needed to face reality eventually. If you were living on your husband's salary, you shouldn't need the inheritance, right? Why did it lead to divorce?
My husband was after Henry's estate from the start. If Henry's inheritance wasn't coming through, then he had no further use for me. Despite having spent decades together, he claimed all was ruined because of me, a woman whose only assets he saw were her looks and money. He even said he wanted his time back, expressing his anger dramatically. Why should I be the one to get yelled at? My husband is a pitiful man with a low salary. I'm the one who wants my time back.
I had only met her husband at family meetings and then yearly at Christmas gatherings. Like Mary, he had a flashy impression, fond of brand-name clothes, accessories, and luxury cars. Given her mention of his low salary, it's likely they both had been eyeing Henry's wealth for some time, probably spending recklessly without any savings. Having lived lavishly on her husband's dime, Mary wasn't in a position to make claims. Marrying someone for their money and then squandering it was their own fault.
Even after consulting with a lawyer, I was turned away, told I had no claim to any inheritance. Everyone's making a fool of me. But you're the one I can't forgive. If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened.
Despite my warnings, she went to the lawyer, only to face the embarrassment I predicted.
"Sally, you must have brainwashed my husband, right? He said he should have married someone like you. Why does he mention your name? You must have seduced him behind my back. That's the only explanation."
Why would you think that?
I don't even have his contact information. Lies. He's never praised a dowdy middle-aged woman before. You must have seduced him and had an affair. Confess, and if you give me the inheritance, I might forgive you.
This is nonsensical. Frustrated by her baseless accusations, I ended the call. The house was already being demolished, and the land was sold, so she couldn't come after me there. I hadn't given her my new address, making future encounters nearly impossible. Just to be sure, I blocked her number, determined to live peacefully. Half a year passed, and Max adapted well to our new life. My sister and I went out to eat once or twice a month, enjoying our days. My recent health checkup showed no issues, and the local shops provided convenience, leaving little to worry about except for that phone call a few months back. Mary, having divorced and depleted her savings, apparently sought welfare support at the social welfare office. During her visit, she was told that if she had relatives who could support her, she would not be eligible for assistance. The relatives who once praised Mary all refused to help with her living expenses, likely aware of her history of lavish spending. This led to her being isolated from her relatives. A caseworker then contacted me, but of course, I had no intention of helping. Considering how she and her ex-husband had approached us with financial motives and her disrespectful behavior even at the funeral, I felt no obligation to assist her now. Despite her accusations of me being money-minded, it was Mary who had succumbed to her own greed. I'm unaware of her current situation. Rumors suggest she quickly lost a job she had found due to conflicts, or that her neighbors noticed her ex-husband's absence, deducing their divorce and her subsequent move. No one seems to know where or how Mary is living now, and I've lost interest over time. Regaining my peace of mind, I cherished my time with Max more than ever. Max, who was always gentle like Henry, became even quieter with age, which worried me. My sister, a longtime dog lover who adored Max, surprisingly acquired a puppy one day. Excited, I visited my sister's family, greeted by a small Shiba Inu. Max, immediately taken by the puppy, watched it play joyously. I hoped the puppy would become a good friend for Max, smiling at the heartwarming scene.
Mom's been in an accident and taken to the hospital. Please, can you drive me there?
I pleaded with my husband, tears streaming down my face. I had just received word that my mother was in a critical condition, unconscious after a traffic accident. However, upon hearing the situation, my husband responded, "I can't, I'm off to a company trip now," bluntly refusing my desperate request. Even as I persisted, he mocked me, saying, "The trip is more important to me. Visiting someone else's mother in the hospital is a waste of time. I'm definitely not going. My name is Jane. I'm 29 years old. My husband, Ben, who is a year older than me, and I got married 2 years ago, both of us working full-time. We met in the same university club. Although the club had many members and it was hard to talk to everyone, we ended up sitting next to each other at a drinking party one day, which led to us becoming close. We also discovered that we both were only children who grew up in single-mother households after losing our fathers early, which quickly brought us closer together. We started going out more and naturally progressed to dating. When we both became comfortable in our jobs as working adults, Ben proposed. Neither of us is currently thinking about children since we're both focused on our careers. However, we do want them eventually and have talked about buying a detached house when the time comes, shortly after getting married. Currently, we're renting an apartment and live close to both of our parents' homes. Since both our fathers have passed away, our mothers, Sarah and my mother-in-law Mary, live alone but have become very good friends. Their similar experiences of not remarrying and raising a child on their own seem to click. And since our family meeting, they've developed a friendship like no other, often meeting for tea or traveling together. I never expected them to get along so well, but seeing my mother happy with Mary makes me glad they met. Mary is also very fond of me, and we have a good relationship. However, Ben isn't too thrilled that Mary seems to prioritize my mother over him. He has quite the mama's boy trait. I knew from his behavior even before we got married how much he cherished his mother, which I understood, coming from a single mother household myself. But shortly after we started living together post-marriage, I discovered his true nature. One holiday, I received a message from my mom with a photo attached, saying she was having lunch with Mary. Having lunch with Mary now? I read the message, accompanied by a photo of the two of them smiling, which naturally brought a smile to my face too. "Hey, Ben. Looks like Mary and my mom are having lunch. Look, she sent a photo," I said, showing the image to Ben, who was at home at the time. However, his mood soured immediately upon seeing it, and he clicked his tongue in annoyance.
"What's this? Some kind of spite against me? Huh? What are you talking about?"
At that time, I hadn't realized Ben disliked my mother. True, Ben often didn't talk much in front of my mother. But I thought it was because we were newly married and he was just nervous. I never imagined he would resent my mother simply because she got along well with his own.
"Lately, every time I invite Mom out for a meal, she turns me down saying she has plans with Sarah. Doesn't your mother know the meaning of restraint?"
I was shocked to hear Ben think this way and speak ill of my mother. Mary, too, seemed to have realized early on that Ben disliked my mother. There was a time when we were dining out as a group, and Ben made a snide remark towards my mother, which Mary couldn't stand and scolded him.
"Ben, what is this attitude towards Sarah? Enough is enough. What? You always side with this person. Haven't you always said I'm your precious son? It's not funny preferring someone you've recently become close with over your own son,"
Ben retorted, but I honestly found his attachment to Mary to be unnaturally strong. Later, when Ben wasn't around, Mary apologized to my mother and me. "I think I've spoiled that boy too much. I'm truly sorry. There's no need for you to worry. I'm not bothered by it either. Ben really loves you." My mother, being gentle-natured and not prone to anger, seemed to accept the situation without blame. However, I could tell right away that she was hurt inside. And Ben, without considering my mother's feelings, progressively worsened his behavior over time. Although Mary would defend my mother, preventing Ben from openly attacking her, he would complain to me whenever my mother and Mary seemed close, eventually even starting to regularly speak ill of my mother. Not long into our second year of marriage, I couldn't take it anymore and had a huge argument with Ben. After a fierce exchange of words, the fundamental issues remained unresolved. And since then, our relationship has become awkward, with less conversation than before. Lately, I've noticed Ben's been coming home late and going out alone on weekends more often. Feeling something was off, I asked him directly. "Work's been busy.
Lots of overtime and working on weekends lately,"
he said. Despite his explanation, I couldn't shake off my feeling of unease. Then, one Sunday, when we both had the day off, I noticed Ben packing early in the morning. It seemed he wasn't going to work after all. Just as I was about to ask why he was packing, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Curious, I answered, only to find out it was the police. After confirming I was Sarah's daughter, the officer on the line dropped a bombshell.
"Actually, Sarah has been involved in a traffic accident."
My mind went blank.
"Mom!"
She was already taken to the hospital, in a critical condition and unconscious. After getting the hospital's name, I managed to end the call with trembling hands. Tears started to overflow as I struggled to think, but knew I had to get to the hospital. However, I don't have a driver's license, so I desperately begged Ben for a ride.
"Ben, something terrible has happened. Mom's been in an accident and taken to the hospital. Please, we need to go now."
But upon hearing the situation, Ben made a face of displeasure. and said, "What?" "I'm about to leave for a company trip. I'll be late for the meetup." "Deal with it yourself," flatly refusing my request.
A company trip? Today? You never mentioned anything.
I realized why he was packing, but I hadn't been informed about the trip at all. And to my shock, he mentioned the trip would last 2 weeks. "How can you think of going on a trip at a time like this? Mom might."
Enough. The trip is more important to me. Your mother is just an unrelated stranger to me. Visiting someone I hate is a waste of time, and I'm definitely not going.
Ben hurled cruel words at me, scoffing. "Get out of the way. I have a plane to catch and I'm busy." He pushed past me, whistling as he packed his clothes into a suitcase. Furious, I yelled,
"You're the worst. Just do whatever you want,"
and left the house, hurrying to the hospital by taxi. Ben went on his trip as planned, oblivious to the crisis unfolding around me. I tried calling him multiple times over the 2 weeks, but couldn't get through. When Ben returned home in high spirits 2 weeks later, I gave him a cold look. Now I have to give Mom her souvenirs. "I wonder if Mom's doing okay," he said optimistically. Without responding, I quietly agreed to go with him to his mother's house. On the way, Ben happily talked about all the souvenirs he bought for Mary. Ben didn't say a word of concern about my mother, who had been in an accident. Upon arriving at his parents' house and trying to open the door, Ben stopped, puzzled.
"Huh? Why is it locked?"
It seemed unusual for the door to be locked, since Mary usually didn't lock it when she was home.
"Is Mom not here?"
Ben murmured. I pushed past Ben, pulled out the spare key I had for their house from my bag, and unlocked the door.
"Hey! Why do you have the keys to the house?"
Ben looked bewildered, but I didn't respond. Entering the house before me, Ben tilted his head in confusion upon not seeing Mary.
"Doesn't something feel off?"
As Ben moved towards the bedroom, I stopped him. "Not that way. This way," I said, leading him to the living room, where a new portrait of the deceased Mary was displayed.
"What?"
Stunned, Ben began to tremble, and, half crying, rushed to the portrait, turning to me.
"Hey! What's going on? What is this?"
I sighed deeply, holding back my anger, and explained. "Mary passed away while you were on your trip. The funeral's already over." Ben glared at me, furious.
"Don't joke around. How can this be? Why does Mom have to die? Wasn't it your mother who was in the accident and in critical condition? If anyone was supposed to die, it should have been her."
Despite Ben's outrageously insensitive outburst, I calmly explained what happened after my mother's accident. My mom woke up after the accident. She had a fracture and is currently undergoing rehabilitation but is gradually recovering. Though my mother was still hospitalized, she was slowly getting better thanks to the medical staff's efforts. But Ben was unsatisfied.
"Then why did Mom have to?"
he asked. "It seems that on the day my mom had her accident, she was on her way to our house. She fell from a pedestrian bridge." And I hesitated before answering. "I guess you had told Mary about going on a business trip, hadn't you?"
"Yeah, I did mention it, but..."
"Mary had been suspicious of you lately. You've been unreachable more often. She probably wanted to verify if you were really going on a business trip," I explained, and Ben looked shocked. According to Mary a month ago, Ben used to call or message her daily, but recently, communication had almost stopped. Mary had trouble reaching him by phone, and on the rare occasions he did call back, he would quickly say he was busy and hang up. Mary thought Ben, being of a certain age, might have naturally become less dependent on his mother. However, she suspected Ben might be hiding something. With her suspicions growing, Mary decided to check if the business trip story was true. Coincidentally, around the same time, I received the call about my mother's accident. Mary, who passed away, had brought souvenirs from a day trip she took with my mother last month, intending to give them to us. That day, I was too distraught to think of anything but getting to the hospital. So I didn't have the chance to inform Mary about my mother's accident. Mary must have taken the bus to the stop closest to our apartment and then walked the rest of the way. There's a pedestrian bridge on the way, and it seems she fell while climbing it. A witness said she missed a step just before reaching the top and tumbled down. Though an ambulance was called immediately, she had hit her head hard. And that's how Mary died. After explaining this to Ben, I glared at him intensely.
After learning about Mary, I called you numerous times.
Over these 2 weeks, no matter how I tried to contact you, you never answered your phone or replied to any messages. Because there were no other relatives to take on the role, I had to act as the chief mourner at Mary's funeral. With my mother still in a critical state, I had to somehow get through Mary's funeral without her real son.
You've been ignoring all contact for 2 weeks, just out having fun, right? This has shown me exactly who you are. I'm divorcing you.
Upon declaring this, Ben collapsed to the ground, crying loudly.
How can you say that right after Mom died? Now's not the time for divorce talk, is it? I didn't contact you because I was always with my coworkers. I had no time.
As Ben sobbed and made excuses, my anger only grew.
Stop lying!
I raised my voice and pulled out a piece of paper from my bag, thrusting it in front of Ben. It was the itinerary for the company trip I found in Ben's room.
It says here the company trip was from the 12th to the 19th for 1 week. But you were gone from the 5th to the 19th. You said just before leaving it was for 2 weeks, right? So what were you doing and where were you from the 5th to the 12th? Well, that's...
I know. You were cheating, weren't you?
And you spent that week with your affair partner, right?
As I spoke with certainty, Ben, who had stopped crying, began to panic.
What are you talking about? Cheating. I took leave for the remaining week to go on a trip with friends. See, work's been busy, and I needed a break.
Fed up with Ben's continued excuses, I pulled out a mobile phone from my pocket. The moment he saw it, his face turned pale. This mobile phone belonged to Ben, found in his closet while he was away on the trip. Likely, there was another mobile phone in his bag, prepared specifically for communicating with his affair partner. Ben had previously claimed he couldn't contact me while on his trip due to lack of time. But he had left his regular mobile phone at home, making it impossible for him to notice any calls. You've been lying through your teeth. You left this phone at home to spend time with your affair partner, didn't you? As I placed the mobile phone in front of Ben, he began to tremble and slammed his fist on the table.
Yeah, that's right. I've been fed up with you for a long time. I've got someone else I love now.
He shouted defiantly, and then,
And how did you know where to find the mobile phone? Don't tell me you searched my room while I was away.
He yelled, which was exasperating. I looked at Mary's portrait and silently apologized to her for showing such a scene before speaking up. Mary told me. At that, Ben choked on his words. After a big fight with Ben over my mother, he started coming home late and going out alone on his supposed workdays off more often. Suspecting something was off due to his increased unavailability, I had confided in Mary. Mary, sharing her suspicions about Ben, had advised me. Ben has had a habit since he was little of hiding things that are inconvenient for him, like bad test scores or a glass he broke that his father cherished. He's always securely hidden such things in the closet. If you find a bunch of towels there, it's likely he's hiding something among them. After Mary passed away, I remembered her words, checked Ben's closet, and sure enough, found the mobile phone.
I can't believe Mom would tell you such a thing.
Ben was visibly distressed, not having expected Mary to doubt him. However, seeing his dismayed state didn't sway me.
I will be seeking a divorce and compensation. I'm prepared to consult a lawyer and take this to court if necessary,
I stated firmly, conveying my resolve. Ben groaned but, realizing he had no way out, reluctantly agreed. Afterwards, we properly divided our assets, and the divorce was finalized. However, the following month, just as I was settling into my new life, I received a call from Ben. Reluctantly answering, I heard Ben plead.
Jane, please, I need your help. What's the matter, exactly?
He explained he was in trouble at work after they found out about Mary's funeral. Since Mary had been listed as Ben's dependent, her death and the necessity of returning her insurance card to the company meant that her death was only then reported to the company, revealing that the funeral had taken place during the company trip. Ben was seen as a disrespectful son who didn't attend his own mother's funeral or even show up, garnering cold looks from his colleagues at work. Yet, Ben lied there too, shifting the blame by claiming I hadn't informed him about Mary's funeral. However, hastily sharing different stories with different people only made things worse. His inconsistencies and contradictions eventually unraveled, revealing his lies. Already viewed as inconsiderate, his repeated dishonesty led to doubts about his character, resulting in his isolation and eventual resignation to escape the situation. Now, without income, Ben is living off Mary's inheritance back at his parents' house. But the fact I didn't attend the funeral is known throughout the neighborhood, making me feel ostracized. So, I thought about selling the house, but that's proving difficult. Ben is now recognized by the neighbors as the worst son, feeling awkward even just walking outside. He had planned to sell the family home quickly, but due to its age, there is a lack of interest from buyers. I'm really struggling right now. So Jane, let's start over. Remarry me and let's live together. Hearing this, I was disgusted. He was only reaching out because his situation had worsened.
Don't be ridiculous. I've had enough of you. I will never remarry you. Please. I can't go on like this. I don't care about you anymore. You should just live with your affair partner.
Rejecting him outright, Ben started to falter.
No, we've already broken up.
Apparently, the affair partner learned about Mary's funeral and, subsequently, that she was the other woman. Ben had hidden his marital status, leading to her anger and their breakup, leaving him alone. It's your fault. I don't want to be with someone like you. Goodbye. As I was about to hang up.
Wait! If you won't agree to remarry, I'll come to your house and argue in person. You're at your parents' place, right?
Ben threatened. But I'm not. I immediately responded.
Where are you then?
I won't tell you. Also, I've recently changed jobs, so lying in wait at my old company is useless. I've already asked everyone to call the police if you show up after my resignation. I decided to sell my parents' house to distance myself from Ben, despite the low likelihood of finding a buyer due to its age. So with my mother's consent, we sold the land after demolishing the house. My mother, having recently been discharged from the hospital, is deeply saddened by the loss of her close friend, Mary. Thus, we moved to a quiet place to live together. And I switched jobs accordingly.
Then at least tell me where you are. After all, I've received care from your mother, and I want to visit her.
Ben was desperate to find out where I was, but his words only infuriated me. And I was surprised by how cold my response was.
Received care? After you've been nothing but trouble for Mom. Don't start saying convenient things now. Besides, Mom has said she never wants to see you again. What? Wait a minute. Jane.
Ben was still trying to say something, but I mercilessly ended the call. I then blocked his number and changed mine a few days later. Later, I found out that Ben was being sued for compensation by the affair partner he deceived. And he was in a dire situation. Unable to borrow money due to lack of employment. He's been doing day labor and part-time jobs while searching for full-time work. My mother and I have started a new life in a new place. Relieved to have cut ties with Ben and reminiscing about Mary without stress. Mom couldn't attend Mary's funeral, nor has she been able to visit Mary's grave since her hospital stay and the move have kept us busy. It seems she hasn't fully accepted Mary's death, often crying while looking at photos and videos of them together.
I really want to visit Mary soon,
she said sadly, so I replied. Yes, we should visit her grave soon. Planning to ensure we don't accidentally encounter Ben. I'm looking forward to making our new life in this new place fulfilling while supporting my mother. On the day we celebrated the 50th wedding anniversary of my in-laws, I arrived late and pulled along my son to introduce him to my sister-in-law, Abigail. This is my son, Mark. Mark, say hello.
I'm Mark. I'm 5 years old.
Mark clung to me and looked at Abigail, shyly greeting her.
Abigail, as I mentioned in my letter, my son has a congenital disability.
Before I could finish, Abigail blurted out.
EW, what a monster! Don't let it spread to my kids.
In that moment, both Mark and I froze as if time had stopped. Abigail's husband didn't say anything, but his look of discomfort was evident, clearly wanting to keep his distance. Kevin and the in-laws were speechless and rigid. I couldn't believe what was being said to such a young child, filled with disbelief. Not knowing what to say to the insensitive remarks of Abigail and her company. I stood there motionless until I heard a voice from beside me. Do people hate me again? Mark looked down, desperately trying to hold back tears. Such words would hurt an adult, let alone a child.
It's not contagious. He has albinism, which just means he was born with less pigment. It's still a disease, it can spread. Scarlett, get rid of that ugly kid fast. Get out.
My husband was trembling with anger. During the heated argument, tears fell from Mark's eyes. Interrupting Kevin, who seemed ready to confront Abigail, my father-in-law Robert spoke up.
Yes, don't ever come back.
The relief was visible on Abigail and her husband's faces. They smiled triumphantly as if they had found someone who understood them. But their smiles quickly turned to surprise.
What? Dad, what are you doing?
My name is Harper, a 40-year-old housewife living with my husband, Kevin, and our son, Mark. Only 5 years ago, the thought of living happily as a family of 3 was unimaginable. Kevin and I had always wanted children but were unable to conceive. I desperately wanted a child, and so did Kevin, which led us to seek fertility treatments at a hospital. There were days when it was hard to see pregnant women in the waiting room, reminding me that children are a gift. Despite careful diet and health management, I often wondered why I couldn't have a child, leading to days filled with self-loathing. The fertility treatments were not only emotionally taxing but also a financial burden, leading to many tearful nights. During those times, the person who was always there to support me was none other than Kevin. His encouragement, holding my hand, and accompanying me to the hospital were incredibly reassuring. "It's okay, I'm sure our baby is just waiting for the right time to come to us." Miraculously, his words gave me hope, and I became more positive. The following year, our efforts paid off, and I became pregnant. We sharing the news with my in-laws Robert and Chloe, who were overjoyed. The baby grew healthy inside me, and we looked forward to the delivery day. On the day of birth, hearing the lively cries, I was deeply relieved and eagerly wished to see the baby's face. Yet, the child born had skin and hair so white and delicate, it seemed touching could break them, like an angel. Needless to say, Kevin and I were astonished. We were confused, as no one in our families had such an appearance.
Why?
The doctor explained our child had oculocutaneous albinism, a congenital condition known as albinism.
Albinism? The one that happens to 1 in 20,000 people.
It's a disease associated not just with physical appearance but also vision problems and sensitivity to sunlight. I regretted not being able to give birth to a normal child after fertility treatments. However, seeing the baby, all that faded away, and we embraced our child fully.
It doesn't matter if it's a rare disease. Our child is as beautiful and precious as an angel.
Exactly. This child chose us. Thank you, thank you. Thus, Kevin and I accepted our long-awaited baby positively and with hope. We named the child Mark and decided to raise him with love. Introducing him as our angel to the in-laws, they were initially surprised, but eventually warmed up to Mark's innocent smile.
"It might be hard, but you two will surely overcome everything. If you ever need help, we're here for you."
The in-laws accepted and promised to love and care for him together. Mark's main concerns were managing sunlight exposure and weak vision. When going outside, sunscreen is essential, and Mark also needs assistive devices for his vision. However, now, thanks to the internet, connecting with friends who share the same concerns has lessened the feeling of struggling alone. There are several considerations in Mark's life, but otherwise, he's a healthy and mischievous boy. Kevin and I are delighted to see Mark increasingly doing things on his own. And before we knew it, 4-5 years had flown by. During this time, we visited the in-laws' house for Christmas, long weekends, and whenever the timing was right. The in-laws live about a 10-minute bus ride away, and from the station. Robert always picks us up in his car, mindful of Mark's condition. "Thank you for always picking us up."
"No problem. I always can't wait to see my grandson."
Once in the car, Mark always brightened up. Certainly, he liked cars, but there was a more pressing issue for him: the stares from others. When on the bus, some people would gawk or recoil at Mark's appearance, whispering or turning away. There were even times when people pointed their phone cameras at him, leading us to ask them to stop and shielding Mark from their view. Such actions deeply saddened me as a mother and sometimes made me angry, wondering why they would do such things. Affected by these stares, Mark would shrink into himself on the bus. Especially since turning 5, he would hide behind me or Kevin, or cling to Robert and Chloe, curling up small. Thinking how hard it must be for Mark himself tightened my chest with pain. One night, before bed, Mark asked, "Mom, Dad, am I weird? Does everyone dislike me? Why would you think that?" I replied, "Because, in the train, everyone looks at me so much." Hearing Mark express his feelings was heart-wrenching, and I've never felt more distressed. Kevin seemed troubled too, his brows slightly furrowed. I pulled Mark close, looked him in the eyes, and assured him, "You're not weird, and nobody dislikes you. Even if people look, you can hold your head high." With tears welling up in his eyes, He listened to my words and simply replied, "Okay, I understand." "Mark, how about you sleep with Dad tonight?"
Okay. Read me a story?
Excited, Kevin headed to the bedroom with Mark. Watching them, I stayed in the living room, sighing.
The 50th anniversary celebration for Robert and Chloe is coming up, and I'm a bit worried.
At kindergarten, there are teachers to support and friends who are told about Mark's condition, which offers some comfort, but public places are a different story. Struggling with this challenge, Mark, Kevin, and I were all searching for solutions, discussing with friends as well. Recently, Kevin brought up the 50th wedding anniversary celebration of the in-laws. Abigail, my sister-in-law living far away, would be coming, and it was suggested we celebrate grandly with her family.
Mark hasn't met Abigail yet. It might be a good opportunity, don't you think, Scarlett? Abigail too?
Truthfully, I didn't have the best impression of Abigail, my sister-in-law. Her family moves often due to her husband's job, and I've only met them once or twice. When Mark was born, I sent a letter but received no reply. Worried they didn't care about our family, I felt anxious about introducing Mark. When I shared my concerns, Kevin reassured me with a smile, "It'll be okay."
Abigail isn't that bad, and her husband has always been nice to me. Okay.
I conceded, perhaps overly concerned about others' judgments. Maybe Abigail and her husband are genuinely kind, and the lack of response to my letter was just due to their circumstances. If they're coming all this way to celebrate their parents' 50th anniversary, we shouldn't dismiss their intent. While I could handle any comments about me, I worried whether Mark would be accepted or subjected to stares like on the bus. But we agreed to include Abigail's family. And so, with lingering anxiety, we approached the day of the 50th anniversary celebration. Due to flight schedules, Abigail's family would arrive later. For this special day, instead of Robert's car, Kevin and I escorted the in-laws to a high-end restaurant. Because we had a reservation, I said, "I'm Harper," and the receptionist led us to our room. Robert and Chloe, smiling happily, held Mark's hand as they walked to their seats. The stylish space, fitting about 10 people, was lit with soft lighting, creating a calm atmosphere. "Grandpa and Grandma are happy." "I'm happy too." "Yes, Mark is happy too." Mark seemed to understand today was special, smiling more than usual. He was dressed in new clothes bought for the occasion, looking even cuter, which made the staff lady smile. After some time chatting, Abigail's family arrived late. They appeared in formal attire, and Scarlett, Mark's cousin, was also dressed in a cute outfit. "Sorry we're late." "Dad, Mom, congratulations today." Abigail dropped her bag and greeted Robert and Chloe. Of course, Abigail's husband and Scarlett smiled and said, "Congratulations." When they settled, I nervously greeted Abigail's family. Abigail, long time no see. Thank you for coming all this way today." "Ah, right." However, she responded indifferently, as if she barely knew me. Gathering my courage, I brought Mark over to introduce him.
This is my son, Mark." "Say hello, Mark." "I'm Mark, 5 years old."
Mark clung to me and shyly greeted Abigail.
"Abigail, as I mentioned in my letter, my son has a congenital disability."
Before I could finish, Abigail bluntly said,
"EW, what a monster. Don't let it spread to us."
Instantly, Mark and I froze as if time had stopped. Abigail's husband, without saying a word, clearly looked uncomfortable, clearly wanting to keep his distance. Kevin and the in-laws were speechless and stiff. I was filled with disbelief at what was said to such a young child. Not knowing what to say to the inconsiderate Abigail, I stood there motionless, but then I was brought back to reality by a voice from beside me. "Do people hate me again?" Mark looked anxious, holding my hand. Laughing, Abigail said,
"Yeah, nobody wants to see your face."
Mark looked down, trying hard not to cry. Such words would hurt an adult, let alone a child. I thought about slapping Abigail right there, but hugged Mark tightly instead.
"What are you saying, Abigail? That's not true." "That's right." "Abigail, how could you say that?"
Chloe hugged me and Mark in defense.
What? Mom, you're defending that monster? It's gross, like, it's all white and has white hair. Is it contagious? Get it away if it's going to spread. It's not contagious. It doesn't spread. He has albinism, a condition of being born with less pigment. So, it is a disease. It could spread. Why did you bring him? Stay away. Scarlett, stay back. Abigail, don't say that. Mark is not a monster, nor is it contagious. Don't treat him like that. Kevin, is that really your child? Unbelievable. Why can't you be more considerate, Abigail? Just get rid of that ugly kid, fast. Get out.
Kevin's hands trembled with anger. During the heated argument, tears streamed down Mark's face. Intervening before Kevin could confront Abigail, Robert spoke up.
Yes, don't ever come back.
Only Abigail and her husband were relieved by those words. Their faces wore a triumphant look, as if to say they have found an ally. But that smile quickly vanished, turning into a look of surprise.
What? Dad, what are you doing?
Robert had grabbed Abigail and her husband's bags and threw them out of the room. Then, after clapping his hands together, he turned back to the astonished couple.
To treat a polite child who greeted you upon meeting for the first time, like this. That's not my daughter. You are the monsters. I don't want to see such ugly faces. But Dad, what if you and Mom catch it? I'm worried. No need to worry. If you had the heart to worry about me, you could have considered Mark's feelings too. Why didn't you? No, come on, that's just not normal, no matter how you look at it. Stop saying such heartless things. Get out now.
Abigail's couple was taken aback by Robert's demeanor, unseen by Kevin and me before. They seemed to want to say something more, but then a voice exclaimed, "Stop it." All eyes, including Kevin's, turned to the source. Surprisingly, it was Scarlett, dressed in her cute outfit. Her cheeks flushed.
Albinism isn't contagious, and he's not a monster. Why would you say that? Dad and Mom, that's awful.
She declared this with all her might, tears streaming down her face. That alone showed she was angry and hurt for Mark, which made me incredibly happy. Yet, Abigail harshly responded to her daughter.
Scarlett, be quiet. You don't know anything. You're the one who doesn't know anything, Mom. I'm so embarrassed right now. Hating Mark without even trying to understand him. I hate you too.
Scarlett's almost shouting voice turned Abigail and her husband pale. Undeterred, Scarlett ran to Mark, towering slightly like an older sister, and gently stroked his head. Don't cry. You should smile. You're not a monster, and you're not disliked. The people who say that are wrong. Okay. Both Scarlett and Mark's faces were smeared with tears and runny noses. It was difficult to get Abigail and her husband to understand Mark, but Scarlett was different, which was reassuring. Seeing Scarlett approach Mark and pat his head, Abigail seemed to snap out of it, hastily leaving with her husband without a word. The commotion drew the attention of other patrons outside, likely making Abigail's family feel unwelcome. While some staff members asked patrons to return to their seats, we resumed our conversation as if nothing had happened. The rest of the meal went smoothly, without tears or derogatory words, marking a peaceful time. After the 50th wedding anniversary celebration ended, and we returned to our usual lives, I was struck by a question. How did Scarlett know about albinism?
Kevin, did you talk to her on the phone? No, I haven't. I thought you had told her, Harper.
Wondering how she knew about Mark without us telling her, we received a letter. The sender was Scarlett, who had apparently gotten our address from Robert and Chloe. The letter, written on cute heart pattern stationery like that of a young girl, contained her earnest words. After dinner that day, we decided to read the letter together. The letter began with "To Mark's mom and dad," sharing Scarlett's personal thoughts on people with albinism. Scarlett, due to her parents' moves, had changed schools several times, about 3 in total. At one of her previous schools, there was a child with albinism similar to Mark. This child had white hair and wore special glasses for poor vision. But after the teacher's explanation, all classmates respected and treated the child well. And Scarlett liked that child. Without discrimination against anyone, not minding their own disability. And being kind to everyone, she found them genuinely cool and fell for them. Even with poor eyesight, they had great hearing, were good at singing, and could play the piano. I wanted to be as kind as them, but Mom was different. On a day when parents gathered, seeing the albino child with Scarlett, Abigail frowned immediately.
Scarlett, who's that child? Dyeing hair in elementary school? And those ugly glasses don't suit at all. You shouldn't play with that child, okay? Understand?
Saying so, she complained. Scarlett was filled with disbelief and felt very upset. Shocked and frustrated at her inability to retort her mother's heartless words. So, I felt relieved when I could finally speak up about Mark. Reading the letter made me feel warm, realizing Scarlett had been harboring those feelings during the 50th wedding anniversary celebration. Later, Scarlett settled in her current school and, driven by a desire to be understood, read an essay on albino awareness during an open class.
My parents labeled my cousin a monster without trying to understand albinism. I think those who say such things have monstrous hearts.
I hope more people understand albinism and refrain from saying terrible things like my parents did. I wish for a class where everyone respects each other as they did at my previous school. The composition she read on open day, advocating for mutual respect, was highly praised. At the same time, Abigail and her husband faced condemning stares and were embarrassed. Following that open day, they were viewed coldly by other parents in the neighborhood, and Scarlett was scolded by Abigail. But she seemed unfazed, hoping to grow up to be someone who can eloquently explain and support people with albinism. Please be kind and stand tall, Mark. I'll do my best too. See you. The letter ended with this message, accompanied by a cartoon character sticker that seemed like it could come from a girl's magazine, saying "Your ally." Of course, Mark still can't read well, nor does he fully understand the meaning of the words. But when I carefully explained how to read it, Mark, with a happy smile, excitedly shouted, "Ally, ally." Seeing this made both Kevin and I happy, and we all ended up laughing together. In fact, since the day of the 50th wedding anniversary celebration, Mark, perhaps remembering Scarlett's words, has always stood tall, never shrinking, whether on the bus or at kindergarten. What kind of mental change occurred, I'm not sure, but it seems Mark has understood Scarlett's words in his own way. When going to meet the in-laws, as usual, we got on the bus and sat down. Some high school girls who seemed to have finished school early were talking about Mark, covering their mouths but their eyes laughing. What's that? white hair. I was considering changing seats, but then I noticed Mark had also seen the girls and was staring back at them.
Mark?
When I called out to him, Mark, still looking at the high school girls, smiled back at them. Surprised, perhaps, the girls moved away, flustered. There were other times when we were talked about or stared at, but Mark began to smile back each time. The speakers would feel guilty, stopping their gossip and diverting their attention to their phones. It seems to be Mark's own way of handling situations, though I wondered where he learned such diplomacy. But upon reflection, Scarlett had encouraged him that day, "Don't cry, just smile." Those words must have resonated with Mark. It's not that there are no more people who mock or stare or demean based on appearance. In fact, we'll likely encounter more such people. Seeing Mark not just protected by me, his mom, but protecting himself, made me feel incredibly proud of his growth. Our child is striving to live with strength.
Maybe it's thanks to Scarlett.
I often think, if only there were more kind-hearted children like Scarlett. Discussing this with friends, I found support among other moms, leading to small educational gatherings in public spaces. If both those directly involved and those around them can understand each other, surely we can connect kind-hearted people and create a slightly kinder world than today. I hope for a world where more people, like Scarlett, understand and treat those with disabilities without discrimination, making it a better place for Mark to live positively. Seeing my granddaughter Mary not touching her hamburger, the server approached us with a stern tone.
"You need to eat what you've ordered, or it'll be a problem."
Would you normally say that to a customer? Arguing seemed futile, so I responded humbly. "I'm sorry. I think she's just waiting for mine to arrive." After my apologetic reply, the server walked away, looking dissatisfied. What a rude attitude. Trying to lighten the mood, I turned to Mary.
"Let's eat, shall we?"
But Mary remained downcast.
"What's wrong?"
Something seemed off. Then, the same server came back to our table, carrying something.
"Here's the toy that comes with the kids' meal."
She slammed the toy onto the table. Looking up at the server, I saw her smirking at Mary. It was a chilling sight. Mary must have felt something was wrong too.
"I don't want this."
She threw the toy on the table to the floor. She's never usually so rough. Now. We shouldn't throw things. As I tried to calm Mary and pick up the toy she had thrown. Suddenly,
"Grandma, let's get out of here."
Mary grabbed my arm as I was reaching for the toy and shouted. Looking at the discarded toy, I noticed a piece of paper with something written on it.
"Grandma, no."
Ignoring Mary's plea, I looked at the folded paper and felt a chill. It was a Saturday. I was on my way to my son Jim's house. It was a warm day, hinting that spring was near. Then, "Mom, thanks for today as well." As soon as I arrived, Jim and his wife Kate left the house together for their once or twice a month Saturday work.
"Grandma, what's for lunch today?"
After seeing her parents off, Mary came to me with a lovely smile. "How about we go out to eat today?" Mary was delighted with my suggestion. "My name is Ellie. I am 63 years old this year. When my son and his wife are busy, I come to look after Mary like this. Having lost my husband early and spent a lot of time alone, the time spent with my granddaughter was nothing short of happiness for me. My son Jim has always tried hard not to be a burden on me. Even though there's no need for him to worry about me, he's been working ever since he graduated from high school. Thinking back, his first job was terrible. It was then I truly understood what a black company was, even as a parent. He would leave for work early in the morning and return home around the time the date changed. You could visibly see him getting thinner, even though he was quite well built, as he continued with that lifestyle. Seeing my son Jim become increasingly distressed, I somehow managed to convince him, and finally, he decided to quit that job. It had been 3 years since he started working there. Though there seemed to be some issues with the company upon leaving, I felt relieved once he was free from that place.
I'm going to be unemployed for a while.
Jim said this with a look of regret, but seeing my child physically and mentally deteriorating was much harder for me. When I told him that,
I'll take my time to think and decide on the next place.
He smiled, seemingly reassured. Being a hard worker, he continued his job search while studying for a qualification in a field he was interested in, and finally, he found a new job. I was worried because of the first experience, but the new workplace turned out to be surprisingly clean. He would come home on time, and there was no unpaid overtime. Jim seemed to have some peace of mind and was lively and enthusiastic about going to work every day. When he started to be recognized for his abilities and got on a career track,
"There's something important I want to talk about,"
he said suddenly with a serious look. I'm sensitive to these things. He must want to introduce a girlfriend.
"Something important?"
I feigned ignorance and asked.
"There's someone I want you to meet, Mom."
My intuition was right. Jim had dated a few women before. I wasn't explicitly told, but you can somehow tell. But this was the first time he wanted to introduce someone to me. So, that means?
I'm free whenever, so let me know when you've decided on a day to bring her over,
I said casually, feeling a mix of happiness and sadness. Later, the woman Jim brought over was polite and greeted properly. I've always taught Jim to greet properly since he was young. So, the first impression was perfect. I didn't intend to judge, but I couldn't help noticing her appearance and behavior.
"Nice to meet you, I'm Kate."
She seemed nervous, her small frame tense.
"Nice to meet you too, I'm Jim's mom."
Wondering if I'd been staring too much, I greeted her brightly to ease the tension.
"Jim, why don't you two sit in the living room and wait?"
While they waited in the living room, I prepared some coffee. Before bringing it over, they were whispering to each other but quieted down when they saw me. As I served the coffee, I heard them say thank you. But then, there was silence for a while. How do mothers around the world liven up moments like these? It's my first time, and I'm just puzzled. Huh? But it's everyone's first time in these situations, isn't it? Realizing something so obvious made me laugh unexpectedly. Jim and Kate looked at me, puzzled. I'm sorry.
"It's just that it's the first time Jim's brought a girlfriend over, so I'm a bit nervous."
I decided to just be myself from now on. After all, we're going to be a family for a long time.
"I'm nervous too. But today, we have something we want to tell you, Mom."
Here it comes. This is the moment to listen seriously.
"Mom, we're thinking of getting married."
I thought so.
"We've already got the okay from Kate's parents, but..."
Jim stops mid-sentence, looking surprised. Next to him, Kate also seems flustered. What are they both so flustered about?
"Mom."
They peek at my face, worried. Wondering what was happening, I felt something cold spill onto my hand on my lap. It took me a moment to realize, but it seems tears were falling from my eyes.
"I'm so sorry. Did I do something wrong?"
It's the first meeting, and here the mother of the person they want to marry is suddenly crying. Kate's panicked reaction is now a funny story, but at that moment, she must have been really anxious.
"Oh, why is this happening? I'm not even sure myself."
Saying that, I laughed through my tears. I had no intention of opposing Jim's marriage. In fact, I was happy that he had finally found someone to be happy with other than me. These tears must be of happiness. But I couldn't deny feeling like a part of my heart was being taken away. After excusing myself for a moment and coming back, they still looked worried. With a deliberately cheerful voice, I said, "Kate, I trust Jim. If he chose you, I know everything will be okay no matter what." Kate seemed to be waiting for what I would say next.
Promise me, both of you, to build a happy family together.
I could see Kate's expression brighten.
Thank you, Mom. All right, no more serious talk.
With that, I started asking about how they got to know each other and their journey to deciding on marriage. While Jim was seeing Kate out, I muttered to my husband's portrait. "Jim is getting married. Time flies, doesn't it?" It felt as if the portrait of my husband smiled back. Kate works at the same place as Jim, and she plans to continue working even after getting married. Jim wanted to live together, but I declined. I didn't want to intrude on the young couple, and I was looking forward to having time to myself, neither wanting to be a burden nor to burden them. They decided on a new home within cycling distance from our house, and Jim moved out. Time flew by, and soon my granddaughter Mary was born. I was amazed at how adorable a creature a grandchild could be. As Kate's maternity leave was coming to an end, I checked with Jim. "Have you decided who will look after Mary?" I was hoping for a chance to take care of Mary. Not out of kindness or obligation, but because I wanted to be with her. However, Jim thought I was worried and gave me a disappointing reply.
"Mom, don't worry. Our company has a daycare."
Jim's new job really seemed to be a respectable white-collar company. I guess I won't be taking care of her. A few days later, Kate, who had been observing our conversation, brought me hope. "Ellie, are you free this Saturday?" She asked over the phone, and since I had no particular plans, I inquired about the matter. "Actually, both Jim and I have sudden work on Saturday, and the daycare is closed on Saturdays." I immediately responded, "Mary? You mean if I could take care of Mary?" I was leaning forward even though I was on the phone. "Could you?" I almost answered too eagerly, but kept my composure.
"Yes, that's fine."
My voice must have trembled with excitement. Kate sounded happy on the other end of the phone. Since then, I occasionally take care of Mary, which has continued to this day. As it approached noon, I took Mary out. As promised, we walked to the nearby family restaurant. I would prefer to eat at home, but after receiving suspicious calls and an unexpected pizza delivery while taking care of Mary at Jim's house, I felt uneasy. The family restaurant we were heading to was where I had worked part-time before, familiar and convenient for us. Upon arrival, the staff guided us to the usual spacious sofa seat. It was Saturday lunchtime, but it wasn't too crowded. "Mary, what would you like to eat today?" I handed her the menu while sitting next to her.
"I want the kids' menu."
Mary opened the menu to the kids' menu page.
"I'll have this."
She pointed to her usual choice, a hamburger. Mary really loves hamburgers, doesn't she? Seeing Mary's smiling face, I chose my own meal. Although spring was near, the days were still a bit chilly. I decided on the seasonal pot au feu. After placing our order via the touch panel, we went to the drink bar. Mary chose orange juice, and I filled a cup with coffee, then we returned to our seats. "Did Grandma know I like hamburgers?"
"Of course."
It was a casual conversation, but my face was smiling the whole time. "Right, Mary. Go to the bathroom before we eat." Mary often wants to go to the bathroom during meals, so I encouraged her to go ahead.
"Okay."
With a lively response, Mary headed to the bathroom. Her steps seemed lighter, perhaps excited for the hamburger. Her retreating figure was endearing to me. When Mary returned, the hamburger was served. But she didn't start eating. Maybe she was waiting for my meal to arrive. "Mary, you can start eating," I encouraged, but Mary looked at me puzzled. That's when the server brought my pot au feu. Noticing Mary hadn't touched her burger, the server spoke in a stern tone. "You need to eat what you've ordered." Would you normally say that to a customer? Surprised, I thought about the food waste issue and wondered if staff were instructed to say this. Arguing seemed pointless, so I responded humbly. "I'm sorry. She's just waiting for mine. We'll make sure it's eaten." The server left with a look of dissatisfaction. She was strikingly beautiful but had such a poor attitude. Shaking off my astonishment, I encouraged Mary. "Let's eat." However, Mary remained downcast and didn't touch her hamburger. "What's wrong, Mary?" Something seemed off. Then the same server approached with something in hand. "Here's the toy that comes with the kids' meal," she said bluntly, placing the toy on the table. Something was wrong. I boldly looked at the server, who was smirking at Mary. It wasn't a kind smile, but something creepy, as if plotting. Feeling a chill, Mary must have sensed something too. "I don't want this." She threw the toy on the floor. Something she'd never normally do. Under different circumstances, I would scold her, but this was different. Aware of other customers, I tried to calm her. Now. We shouldn't throw things." As I tried to calm Mary and pick up the toy she had thrown. Suddenly, "Grandma, let's get out of here!" Mary grabbed my arm as I was reaching for the toy and shouted. "What are you talking about?" I noticed something had come out of the discarded toy. Like a piece of paper. "Grandma, no!" Ignoring Mary's plea, I looked at the folded paper and was horrified. It was covered in what looked like a spell. "What is this?" I remembered the suspicious calls at Jim's house, with a voice chanting a spell as soon as I answered. Could there be a connection? Noticing something was wrong, the manager came out from the back. "Is there something wrong?" he asked, offering a hand as I crouched. He seemed to notice the paper in my hand. "What is this?" The manager looked disgusted. Standing up, I explained the situation. The unpleasant server just glared at Mary, silent. "I'm very sorry." The manager apologized, but the woman wouldn't take her eyes off Mary. I feared for Mary's safety and hugged her close, addressing the woman. "Even though the manager has apologized, don't you have anything to say?" I had tried not to upset her, but it seems I reached my limit too. My tone became a bit harsh. Perhaps triggered by my tone, the woman suddenly shouted, "If it weren't for this brat!" She lunged at Mary. Instinctively, I shielded Mary, and the woman scratched me, yelling, "Move! Let go!" The manager tried to stop her, but he couldn't restrain her alone. Hearing the commotion, several male staff members subdued her, and someone had called the police. Mary started crying out of fear. "I'm sorry, Mary," I said, holding my scratched area and comforting her trembling body. Before the situation escalated further, Mary and I were taken to the restaurant's office. The woman was there too. "Emma, why did you do that?" The manager asked her, but she remained silent. "I'm really sorry." The store manager apologized to us again. As I was pondering over the situation, the police arrived. Emma, 33 years old. I overheard her name during the separate questioning. I told the police about Emma's aggressive behavior towards Mary for not eating her hamburger and about the suspicious paper in the toy. Then, Mary, who had been listening. "Grandma, it's not that." She tugged at my sleeve. "What's wrong?" I asked, but she seemed hesitant. "Mary, can you tell me that story?" A young police officer gently encouraged her.
I saw it. When I was going to the bathroom, that woman put shrimp in the hamburger.
Mary hesitantly testified. It was a fact I hadn't known.
So that's why you didn't eat it?
It sounded like Emma clicked her tongue. The young officer seemed to realize.
This child has a shellfish allergy.
He finally understood and asked the manager to check if the hamburger was still available.
Too bad, it must have been disposed of by now.
Emma spoke up for the first time after the two had left the office, crossing her arms and legs with a disdainful look.
Could you answer our questions as well?
The officer sighed in disbelief at her questioning.
That's what I've been saying. I have nothing to tell. I'll keep silent.
Emma fell silent again, idly playing with her loosely permed hair, looking bored. Her demeanor changed drastically when the manager and the young police officer returned to the office. In the officer's hand was a plate with a cold hamburger. Emma looked as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Under the police officer's supervision, the manager cut the hamburger open. Inside wasn't just shrimp, but also crab meat used in crab cream croquettes.
Does this restaurant's hamburgers normally contain shrimp and crab meat?
The officer asked. Probably for confirmation.
No, they do not.
The manager seemed disappointed. Then, everyone in the room turned their gaze towards Emma. She kept her head down and didn't move, but then she started to shake her shoulders.
Emma.
When the manager spoke to her, a small voice leaked out. I thought she might be crying. But it turned out she was trying to suppress laughter. Lifting her face, she finally couldn't hold back and burst out laughing loudly.
I got caught.
Her voice was buoyant, like someone caught in a mischievous act, clearly enjoying herself.
I'll tell you everything. But I want that handsome guy over there, not you.
She pointed at the young police officer after hearing our conversation.
Behave yourself.
The officer who had been questioning Emma scolded her.
Oh, don't look so scary.
Emma winked, but it seemed ineffective on the experienced officer. What a woman. I could only stare in disbelief at the scene. The details Emma bragged about were beyond normal comprehension for me. She claimed to be Jim's ex-girlfriend, a co-worker from his previous black company. Jim was treated as incompetent there, so Emma had broken up with him. However, upon hearing rumors of Jim's success at his new job, she attempted to reconnect. But Jim. Emma showed no remorse for her actions.
I even graciously offered to get back together, and he rejected me.
She complained. Understandably so. Jim was already married to Kate, and they had Mary.
I thought if I could just deal with a child, he'd choose me over that plain woman.
She spoke as if expecting understanding, but surely no one empathized. Emma had been monitoring Jim and Mary, engaging in harassment whenever she disapproved of something. The delivery orders I didn't recognize and the suspicious calls were her doing. When I started bringing Mary to this family restaurant, Emma also started working here, learning Mary's preferences and allergies. I was horrified. I even regretted inadvertently revealing Mary's allergy myself. I embraced Mary as she leaned against me. I thought I finally had my chance today. After confessing everything, Emma sighed with disappointment. When her story ended, the police officer took her away from the office. As she left, she glared at Mary and laughed creepily, which made me tighten my embrace. After apologizing to the restaurant staff for the inconvenience and thanking the person who saved the hamburger from being disposed of, Mary and I went back to Jim's house. We waited for Kate and Jim to come home and then told them about the day's events.
That woman, she did what?
Jim clenched his fist, trembling with anger, but Kate gently enveloped his hand.
I had heard about her, but what a terrible woman.
Kate knew of her from Jim's stories. If only I had rejected her more firmly. No, it's not your fault. I should have been more careful, too. Leaving everything to Ellie and even making her scared. Both Jim and Kate blamed themselves. I felt the same. Had I adequately protected Mary while she was in my care? In the heavy silence, Kate finally spoke. At least Mary is safe. That's all that matters. To ensure such an incident wouldn't repeat, we discussed and decided that Jim's family would move. Emma was sentenced to a severe prison term for attempting to harm a child. Unsatisfied with the verdict, she became frenzied and violent in court, looking possessed. Watching her from the gallery, Kate and I decided to remodel our home to protect Mary from that demon again. Emma continued to chant spells in prison, deemed insane, and was eventually transferred to a psychiatric ward. I was certain she wouldn't leave there. Watching her frenzied state confirmed my belief. But still, we needed reassurance. Jim's family moved into a home equipped with security cameras, alarms, and immediate security response. Kate switched to part-time work for more flexibility and spent more time with Mary. We were determined never to let Mary be scared again. We likely still share that sentiment. Grandma, why do you look scared? 5 years later, Mary, soon to be a 5th grader, peered into my face. Oh? Did I look scared? I diverted the topic. Let's get ready. Aren't we going out to eat? And also called out to Kate and Mary's sister, Lucy. It was Saturday. Basking in the warm spring sunshine, we started walking. Mary held Lucy's hand as they walked ahead, while Kate and I followed, watching their backs. I'm Isabella. I really dislike my parents. What bothers me the most is their obsession with what others think. They use their affectionate behavior towards me to win over people's approval. It seems like that's all that matters to them. So, at home, they were very strict with me. I was constantly nagged about etiquette and how to speak properly, down to the smallest detail. Naturally, I rebelled against that, but they never listened to what I had to say. All that mattered to them was appearing as good people in the eyes of others. They wanted me to play the role of a quiet, well-behaved child. As a young girl, I just convinced myself that it was how things were supposed to be. How long would I have to endure this? Would I have to live with this dissatisfaction forever? I want to get out of this house as soon as possible. Even as a child, I was consumed by this thought. But unexpectedly, a turning point came much sooner. It was when I was in elementary school. My sister Chloe was born. And she was much more pretty than me. It was only a matter of time before our parents' interest shifted from me to her. Eventually, all their love and attention fully turned to her. Thankfully, it allowed me to distance myself from my parents. I can finally be free, I thought, but it turned out they weren't done with me. I realized it during my senior year of high school. It was when I told my parents I wanted to get a job. Of course, I had always thought about leaving home since I was little. Graduating high school was my chance to leave. I had been looking forward to that opportunity for so long. But then, my father said something completely unexpected. No way! You're going to college! I was shocked by his forceful tone. Lately, my parents had been so focused on Chloe. I thought they would easily agree. Maybe he had some expectations for my future. Why do I have to go to college? With a glimmer of hope, I asked him. His response shattered my expectations completely. You need a decent education to marry well, you know. So that was it. I finally understood why my parents were so concerned about appearances. They were planning to use my marriage prospects to make their own lives easier. I want to work, I protested. Then, are you going to pay for your moving expenses yourself? He retorted. His words left me speechless. Given their concern for appearances, my parents had always given me an allowance. But I didn't have enough to afford a move. Moreover, my high school prohibited part-time jobs. There was virtually no way for me to earn the moving expenses myself. He knew it, which is why he said it. As I struggled to respond, he laughed.
We've spent quite a lot on raising you. Maybe you should pay us back for that?
That's.
If you don't like it, go to college.
He concluded. In the end, I couldn't argue back, but if I looked at it differently, they were offering to send me to college for free. As much as they might want to, they couldn't just force marriage or arranged matches on me against my will. So, I decided to obediently go to college and then escape after graduation. After that, I enrolled in a local college. But since my education was just for the sake of appearances, I wasn't allowed to live alone. My father never really considered my academic pursuits at college.
I'll pay your tuition, but in return, you'll have to work part-time and contribute to the household expenses,
he said shortly after I started college. How much should I contribute? I asked.
Let's say $500 a month.
I wanted to focus on my studies now that I was in college. But he would never listen to such a request. Reluctantly, I juggled part-time work with my college lectures. The amount I had to contribute as living expenses was no small sum. With reports and test studies, I could only work a few hours each day. It was a barely manageable amount.
But I don't want to waste this opportunity.
So, I sacrificed sleep, splitting my time between studying and part-time work. Eventually, I graduated from college and even secured a job at a real estate company.
Now I can finally leave home.
That's what I thought, but my plan was naive. When I told my father about my job, he said,
"It's fine for you to work, but you can't live alone." "Why not?"
I asked, puzzled.
"What if you end up with some bad guy if you live alone?"
Huh?
"Anyway, stay at home until you get married."
"That's ridiculous."
"Or can you pay back your college tuition right now? If so, I might consider letting you live alone."
"That's impossible. I've been contributing part-time earnings to the household."
"Then, give up on living alone,"
he said with a loud laugh. It seemed he had planned everything. Anticipating that, he had made me contribute to the household expenses. In the end, it was a life dictated by him. Was there no way for me to fight back? With these worries, I started working. But then, a new problem arose. He quit his job shortly after I started working. The reason was back pain. Of course, that was just a facade. He just didn't want to work anymore, and was clearly relying on my income. Still, I couldn't abandon my family. I had even researched ways to cut ties with them, wanting to become a stranger. But there's no way to completely sever ties with family. Parents will always be parents. There's no escaping that. Yet, I hadn't given up on escaping from home. Believing that one day I could live on my own, I diligently saved money. But my father would surely notice my plans. Several years had passed since I started working. One day, when I got home from work, there was a cake on the table.
"What's this about?"
I asked Chloe, and she replied with a smile. "I got accepted into college."
"Really? Congratulations."
"Thank you." Chloe clapped her hands in joy. I felt happy for her too, but then my father's next words instantly dampened my mood.
"Okay, so you'll be paying her tuition."
"What? I have to pay it?"
"Of course. I can't work because of my injury."
What a thing to say. He looks perfectly healthy to anyone, but arguing with him would be pointless. It's true that he has no income. If I don't pay for Chloe's education, she won't be able to go to college. He knows that and is unabashed about it. That means my plans to live alone are pushed even further away. In his eyes, he gets Chloe's education and keeps me from moving out. Chloe is a good girl. Her presence allowed me, as a young girl, to keep my distance from our parents. I may not be close to Chloe, but I owe her that much. So, I decided to pay for her tuition.
Looks like living alone just got further away.
That night, I ended up drinking alone late into the night, grumbling about my father. Later, Chloe safely started college. I worked even harder to pay for her tuition. However, such a lifestyle naturally took its toll, and I started to feel worn out. One day, distracted by fatigue, I left my wallet at the entrance and left the house. Arriving at the bus station, I reached for my IC card to board the bus and realized I didn't have my wallet.
Shoot. I left my wallet.
I quickly remembered leaving it at the entrance. I called my mother, who was at home, and she said, "Chloe took your wallet to you. She had to go to college for something." "She did?" "She said she'd drop it off on her way." I immediately started running back home. Then, a few minutes from the bus stop, near a grocery store, I ran into Chloe. She was carrying a shopping bag from the store. "Chloe, do you have my wallet?" "Here it is." She handed me my wallet. I immediately checked the contents. "You're so suspicious," she teased. "I have the company's card in there. If I lose it, it's trouble for the company." The corporate card and the IC card were both inside. The money was untouched, and I felt relieved. "Thanks, Chloe." I thanked her and hurried back to the bus stop. Thanks to her, I managed to avoid being late. I need to be more careful from now on. That night, I bought a thank you cake for Chloe. She was delighted, and I was grateful. But at that time, I was making a big mistake. Some days later, Aria from accounting came to me at work. "Can I talk to you for a sec, Isabella?" She was a very reliable colleague. She often gave me clothes and cosmetics she didn't need, as I was living frugally. In many ways, I owed her a lot, both professionally and personally. So, I thought she wanted to talk about something personal, but it turned out to be a bit different, and Aria took me to a private place. "What's going on, Aria?" "Listen. I wanted to ask you, have you ever used the company card for personal reasons?" The company card she referred to was the corporate card. Designed for managing expenses in one place, the company had issued these cards to employees. Of course, as a salesperson, I also had a company-issued card. However, the charges were to be billed to the corporate account. So, using the card for personal reasons would be immediately noticeable. I think I've only used it during work hours," I replied, feeling anxious. I didn't recall doing anything wrong, but I couldn't completely rule out the possibility of it being used without my knowledge. As I was pondering, she said, "Actually, your card was used at a grocery store. It looks like it was for buying water. Do you remember?" Grocery store, water. I thought hard about it. Then, I remembered the day I forgot my wallet. For a brief moment that day, Chloe had my wallet. I normally never let anyone else handle my wallet, especially at work. Therefore, if someone else used the card, it had to have been Chloe on that day. "Well, do you know the date it was used?" I didn't want to suspect Chloe. I asked Aria, hoping to prove it wasn't her. If the card was used on a different day, then she wouldn't be the culprit. I must have been absent-minded and accidentally used the company card. That's what I wanted to believe, but reality was harsh. The card had been used on the very day I forgot my wallet. "Is there anything you can recall?" Aria asked. On impulse, I blurted out, "Oh, I might have mistaken it for my IC card." "Really?" "I sometimes buy water before work." "I see. I'm really sorry about that." I paid the amount that had been charged right there. I made excuses in a panic, but Aria comforted me, saying, "Don't worry, I've made the same mistake before." I was worried it might happen again. Driven by anxiety, I asked Aria for a favor right then and there. "Are you sure? It'll be extra work for you, Isabella." "Yes. I don't want to repeat the same mistake." "Okay, I'll take care of it." "Thank you so much." Thus, I managed to avoid turning it into a big issue. But I knew there wouldn't be a second chance. If something similar happened again, it would surely be a major problem. That's why I took the initiative. That incident was a significant turning point for me. I had always thought Chloe was a good girl, but she was a child doted on by our father. She never rebelled against him. If she's aware of everything, maybe she's just pretending to be good, not just outside the house, but in front of me as well. At that moment, I found her smile strangely frightening. My parents were trying to use me for their own benefit. So, I was already cautious of them, especially my father. But now, I had to be wary of Chloe too. What should I do? The thought of living with my parents and Chloe became scary. I had always wanted to leave, but now more than ever. After much thought, I confided in my boyfriend, Timothy. "Why don't we get married then?" he said casually. I was at a loss for words. He smiled, If we're married, you can leave your house. I'm a civil servant, so they probably won't object. That's true. He and I were classmates in college. We'd been dating for over 5 years, and I had been thinking it might be time. But I had my family to consider. I couldn't easily say yes to marriage. However, I had told him about my family's problems. He had listened and advised me on various things. Despite all that, he was still willing to marry me. Please, I'd appreciate it. So, I decided to get married. But it wasn't just happiness filling me up. There were too many problems, especially with my father. It wasn't certain that he would agree to the marriage. I'll have to persuade him carefully. I decided to take my time convincing him. But as I hesitated to bring up the topic of marriage at home, time just passed by. Half a year went by like that. I need to say something soon, I thought to myself. Then, unexpectedly, my father and I got into an argument.
Enough. I've told you many times to marry the person I introduced. That's impossible. I'm seeing someone. What? Who is the guy? He's a civil servant. A good person.
He fell silent at my words and seemed to be thinking. I took the chance to say,
he's willing to give a generous dowry. That should satisfy you, right?
He looked hesitant. That could work. I decided to push through.
How much should the dowry be? $30,000.
I thought that was a lot. But when I mentioned it to Timothy, he agreed to provide it. Thus, with his help, I was able to leave my home. Once the decision was made, everything else went smoothly. I started preparing to move right away. Then, on a certain Sunday, I arranged for the movers to come. During the move, Chloe approached me.
Just keep your promise to pay for my tuition, okay?
That's fine, but can I ask you something? You've used my card without permission, haven't you?
Oh, you found out, huh?
She said, without any sign of remorse. I had tried several times to confront her about the truth, but never got the chance. I gathered my courage to ask, but it seemed like no big deal to her. Using someone else's card is a crime. Do you understand that?
It's fine, we're family, aren't we?
She replied, showing no guilt. I was infuriated. I'll deposit the tuition money into the designated account. But that's it. Consider it severance. Huh? Once I leave this house, we're strangers. Do whatever you want. She walked off with a scoff. Later that evening, when the moving was done, I went to the living room where my father was waiting. Where's the money? It's always about money with you. Here it is.
I've always dreamed of profiting from marrying you off to someone well off since you were born.
Well, this should be enough. I've contributed plenty to this house already.
Yeah, now it's all up to Chloe's future spouse.
He smirked, his comment dripping with sarcasm. He might keep coming back to ask for more money. That thought makes me angry. But when that time comes, I'll just have to turn him away. Then we had our last meal as a family. Chloe wasn't there, though. According to my mother, she was out with friends. Better not to see her. After the meal, I gathered my belongings and decided to leave the house. But as I was leaving, I ran into Chloe.
Oh? Still here, Isabella? Ah, right, here, I'm returning this.
Without a word, she handed something over. I looked down and saw it was the company card. I quickly checked my wallet.
Only realizing now? I took it when I was in your room.
You're so clueless. I clenched my teeth. Clearly, she had used it without permission. That's when it hit me. Chloe brazenly admitted.
I used your card for drinks and meals for about 100 people, so check it up.
Then, without being asked, she started telling me all about it. She talked about a reunion she had and going to an all-you-can-eat, one thing after another. She even mentioned choosing an expensive restaurant, thinking about the card's limit. That really made me angry. So, I retorted, who are you, exactly?
What? You were serious about us being strangers once you left home? But what about the tuition fee?
She kept bothering me about it.
The bank card for the tuition fees has been given to Dad,
I said, and quickly walked away. Afterwards, I joined Timothy and started our new married life. Nothing much changed, though. I continued working, and the only real change was our home. But that was the biggest change for me. I was filled with a sense of freedom I had never felt before. I hoped this happiness would last a long time while enjoying life with him. About half a year went by. One day at work, Chloe showed up.
"You're here. Come out."
She caused a scene at the company reception. Hearing it, I rushed to the reception. "Chloe."
"There you are. What do you think you're doing, you liar?"
She yelled the moment she saw me. She started shouting at me, showing me her bank card.
"I got a call saying the tuition couldn't be withdrawn, and I was embarrassed, you know."
"What are you talking about?" "I made sure to deposit it."
"Huh? But it clearly hasn't been withdrawn."
"Don't you even know how to check your bank card? Are you really a university student?"
"Of course I am, 4th year at a national university. I've even secured a job,"
she yelled. Sighing, I explained. "I deposited this year's $5,000 tuition fee. Here's the deposit record, see?"
"That's exactly it. That amount was withdrawn from the card. You must have done it."
"It was you who withdrew it, right?"
"I don't even have a card." "So it was you."
"But I heard you paid for foods for 100 people with it, didn't I?"
"Foods? What foods?"
"Don't you remember paying for an all-you-can-eat for 100 people with the card?" As I questioned her, her face turned pale. In a panic, she started making excuses.
I used your company card, but it's a corporate card, so."
Clearly, she didn't understand. So, I explained to her carefully. A corporate card withdraws from the corporate account. That's correct knowledge.
"So, the card I used was—"
"But once, someone used my card without permission. So, I had the withdrawals changed to my personal account."
"Personal account?"
What I had was indeed a corporate card. That was when I realized. The withdrawals were being made from my personal account, not the corporate account. That setup, while involving more paperwork for expense claims, allowed for private use of the card. Essentially, it eliminated the need to carry multiple cards. Plus, if someone else used it, the company wouldn't suffer any damage. Meaning, when she paid for the drinks, it was already set to withdraw from my personal account. So, the amount for the drinks is gone. It's your responsibility since you used it."
"What about the university tuition?"
"I paid what was asked of me. You'll have to figure out the rest." With that, she began to make even more noise. Eventually, the police arrived and restrained her.
"No! That's not me."
"What do you mean? You admitted to using my card."
"That was—"
"I clearly told you. Using someone's card without permission is a crime."
"But—"
"Think about what you've done." In the end, she was taken to the police station for questioning. However, I didn't file a complaint. I didn't see the need, especially since someone had uploaded her outburst at my company on social media. Unsurprisingly, it quickly drew a wave of criticism. She ended up being expelled from her university. After that, my parents, who concerned about appearances, moved to the countryside with her. It seemed they thought they could escape the scandal by leaving town. Their plan was to find a marriage partner for Chloe there and then extort money from him. But given their bad characters, it was unlikely to work. I heard they quickly got into trouble with Chloe's new partner.
"Isabella! We're being sued for damages! Help us!"
My father contacted me about a month after I moved. Causing trouble within just a month, they would likely repeat the same mistakes.
"I'm sorry, but if you come to our house, I'll file a complaint about the previous incident.
Be prepared for that." After I said that, he stopped contacting me. But with no money and no job, I couldn't help but worry. So, I had a private investigator secretly check on them, and they turned out to be working together at a logistics warehouse. Apparently, it was the company of the person Chloe had clashed with. They must have been told to work off the debt if they couldn't pay it. Hearing they were working long hours in a gloomy warehouse, I felt a bit relieved. They should be able to pay off the damages and earn their living expenses. I decided to let them fend for themselves and keep working. Meanwhile, Timothy and I continued our happy married life. My job was going well, and my sales performance was steadily improving. With no family around, money was accumulating. all that good fortune made me a little apprehensive about the future. But for now, I want to fully enjoy this happiness I've finally attained with Timothy.